A man was in a hot air balloon, and he was lost. He had promised a friend that he would meet him, and now he was running late. And now he didn't even know where he was. So he descended in the balloon until he was about 30, 40, 50 feet above the ground, and he began to survey the landscape. He finally saw a woman walking along a path, and he called out to her, "Ma'am, can you help me?" She looked up and said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "Can you tell me where I am?" She said, "Yes. You're about 30 feet above the ground, between 38 and 39 degrees north latitude and 43 and 44 degrees west longitude." "Thank you," he said. He thought about it for a minute and then said, "Are you an engineer?" She said, "Yes. How did you know?" He said, "Well, you told me exactly where I am, information that is absolutely useless to me. I don't know any more about where to go than I did before we talked, and now that we've talked, I'm even more late for my appointment than I was before." "Really?" she said. "Are you a manager?" He said, "Yes, I am. How did you know?" She said, "Because you have no idea where you are, no idea where you're going. You made a promise you can't keep. You managed to rise to great heights on nothing but hot air. You're depending on people beneath you to get things done, and we've only talked for a few minutes, and already you're blaming it all on me." I don't think the engineers or the managers were laughing at that one. My purpose was not to be hard on the managers or engineers, but to ask you two questions about that story. Question number one: how recently did you have a conversation similar to that with your spouse? Just how recently? Don't look at the calendar. Maybe you need to look at your watch. How recently did you have that kind of conversation where you seem to absolutely miss, and yet the temperature rises? That's the first question. Second question: what do these two people, that man and that woman, or what do the two of you need most that would help bring that conversation to a better conclusion? I want to invite you to take your Bibles and open them to the Gospel of Luke, Luke's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 27. Today's sermon is entitled, "The Best Thing You Can Do for Your Spouse." We've turned to this section, this passage in the Gospel of Luke, because I believe nestled in the heart of this passage is contained a statement that leads us to the very best thing you can do, that I can do for our spouses. Now, I know you may be a bit troubled if you found this passage in your Bible, because you know today is about spouses. Yet the section to which we've turned has the heading, "Love Your Enemies." You say, "Carl, what's up with that?" And then someone across the sanctuary says, "I know exactly what's up with that. Leave them alone." But it's here we find this statement. Now, allow me to set the context. We're about to read from Luke's rendering of what in Matthew we call the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to land right in the heart of the sermon. In fact, we're going to come to a section of the sermon this morning where Jesus is talking about loving those who are unlovely and unlovable. It's in that context that he gives us an insight. While it can apply in many different areas of our lives, it can certainly apply to marriage. So read it with me. Luke's Gospel, chapter 6. We will reread what Peggy read so well just a few minutes ago. Beginning in verse 27, it says, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt. Give it to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them, without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. Because he is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. It's right at the heart, nestled right at the heart of this passage, that comes a statement, do to others as you would have them do to you. Now, that statement was not new with Jesus. There was a variety of settings and contexts from the ancient world where we know that people, even before the time of Jesus, made similar kinds of statements. In fact, if you go back to the Old Testament in Leviticus chapter 19, you will find a very similar statement there. So it's not entirely new with Jesus. But most of the other occurrences of this kind of thinking were different in one significant point. It was the Rabbi Hillel, the famous Jewish rabbi, who was approached by a Gentile in about 20 AD, who asked Rabbi Hillel a question. He said, "Rabbi, I want to know what the heart of the Jewish law is. In fact, I would like to have you summarize the Jewish law for me." But apparently this particular Gentile was rather impatient. He couldn't remember very well, so he said to Rabbi Hillel, "Please don't give me all those lengthy explanations. I don't want all that. I'll forget it before I get away from you. What I would like you to do is to summarize the entire Jewish law in the time that you are able to manage balancing on one foot. Can you do it in that brief amount of time?" So Rabbi Hillel said to him, "I can." And so balanced on one foot, he said to the Gentile, "What is hateful to you, do not do to others. This is all the law, and the rest is commentary. Go and learn that." And he got it in while standing on one foot. That was his answer. What is hateful to you, do not do to others. That's a very similar statement to many of the other appearances of this sentiment that appear in the ancient world. They are different from what Jesus had to say in one primary way. They're passive. You see, if you can merely restrain yourself from resist doing something unkind to someone else, you fulfill it. In other words, if you feel like hitting someone, don't do it. If you feel like saying something hurtful, don't do it or say it. If you do that, you will fulfill what Rabbi Hillel said in the ancient world. Jesus takes that sentiment and he turns it to positive action. It's not sufficient with Jesus to merely resist doing something. No, he says not just what you hate, don't do to someone else. No, he says do to others what you would have them do to you. It requires proactive action. It requires initiative. I will act in a way that is loving. Remember the context of what Jesus is saying? He's talking about love. Loving those who are unlovely and unlovable. That's his context for this statement. And that's what drives New Testament scholar Darko Bach to make some interesting statements about this particular passage. Listen to what Bach has to say about the love that Jesus speaks of and the culture in which we live. He writes, "Love is many things in our culture. For many, it can be likened to an electric charge. Either the zap of the feeling is there, or it's not. For others, love is an arrangement, almost like a contract, sometimes voluntary, other times imposed by circumstances. Love for family members is not a given. Instead, events have necessitated it. In other words, I didn't ask to be born into this family, but here I am. And now I have to love them. Marriages often proceed," he says, "with this kind of arranged love. As long as the contract works and the zap is present, the arrangement is on. Often such love is managed by performance. Love is to be demonstrated by what is done for me. If you really cared for me, in other words, you would do this for me." But Bach thinks that Jesus' words take issue with that. He continues, "This kind of arranged or easy love runs counter to Jesus' description of what love is. For the child of God, the love of Jesus is none of these things described above. Jesus decries our culture's version of it. What is required to possess true love is an understanding of what it is to be loved by God and how God wishes us to love others. At the center of Jesus' sermon is a unique concept of love. This love cannot merely be reduced to the golden rule. It is love that is golden, even when everything else is not." Did you catch that last sentence? It is love that is golden, even when everything else is not. "Do to others," said Jesus, "what you would have them do to you." That action, that ethic is based in love. And what is contained therein, I think, that truly the very best thing that you can do for your spouse, it might be summarized by one word: empathy. Empathy. Empathy leads to this action of Jesus, and it grows out of this action of Jesus. Empathy. Now, maybe you'll ask me, "Carl, what exactly is empathy? I've heard the word before, not sure I could define it. What exactly is empathy?" Well, we could define it in different ways. We could go to the dictionary. We could ask the dictionary, "What is empathy?" And here's how the dictionary would respond. The dictionary would say, "Empathy is the intellectual identification with or the vicarious experiencing of the feelings, thoughts, and actions of others." That's empathy. Is your heart all aflutter with that definition? You're still sitting there thinking, "I don't know, that helps, but I still don't quite get it." Well, maybe we could go to a funeral home. We could slip in the front door, down the hallway, and peer into a fairly dimly lit room. There we see a man seated alone by the casket of his wife. He is weeping. And then we observe as a colleague comes in from work. These two don't know each other all that well at work, but here he is. His colleague comes in, the man stands up, they embrace, they hold on to each other while tears streak both sets of cheeks. That's empathy. Or maybe you like the authors that say there's a distinction, they say, that we draw between sympathy and empathy. They say sympathy is seeing a drowning person and throwing them a lifesaver. Empathy, they say, is diving in to save the person. That's empathy. Or maybe you would just like a brief, succinct definition of what is empathy. The author Jess Lair says, "Here's what empathy is," he says. "Empathy is your pain in my heart. Your pain in my heart." That's empathy. Or we could enlarge it to say, "It's your joy in my heart. It's your bewilderment in my heart. It's your sadness in my heart. It is anything that is within you that finally resides within me. That's empathy. It seems to me as I read the words of Jesus, first of all, about loving those who are not particularly lovely, that when I read what he says about the ethic of how we are to conduct ourselves in that loving manner, do to others as you would have them do to you, you cannot escape the fact that empathy is at the core of all that he has to say. Empathy. I would suggest to you that empathy may be the very best thing you can give to your spouse. And you say, well, why, Carl? Why? Of all the things that you could choose, why would you say empathy is the best thing you could do for your spouse? The relationship writers, the family therapists and teachers, Les and Leslie Parrott, describe being backstage in the green room, preparing to go on Oprah's television show. Just before they were about to walk out on the stage, the show's producer came in and told them, now listen, I know Oprah. I know how she works. It's likely that once you get out there, she'll ask you a question. It's a question she likes to know. And when you get out there, what she probably will ask you is, what is the one single thing that is the most important thing you can do to help improve your marriage? So, said the producer, just be ready. She's very likely to ask you a question like that. Well, listen to what Les and Leslie Parrott said on reflecting on that. They said, we didn't have to think twice. In fact, this isn't the first time we've been asked this question. We hear this question a lot. In nearly every interview we do on marriage, whether in print or radio or on television, that question is predictable. Why? Probably because of the topic. We all like to get to the heart of the matter. Think about it. Wouldn't you like to know the most important thing you can do to keep your kids off drugs? To save more time? To extend your life? To prepare a perfect souffle? To stop global warming? To get a promotion? Whatever the topic, we like to know the one key thing that matters most. What's the essential element, that indispensable and vital factor for success? When it comes to that crucial component in a successful marriage, there is no need to guess. We stand on a mountain of research and clinical expertise when we tell you the answer. We can tell you the answer, they say, in one word: empathy. It's putting yourself in your partner's shoes. The happiest couples on earth are those who become adept at trading places. Now, the Parrotts are not far from alone in that sentiment. In fact, just one sentiment from Bernard Gurney, the Director of Relationship Enhancement for the Washington, D.C.-based Coalition for Marriage, Family, and Couple Education. This is what Gurney says in one sentence. More than any other single deficiency, I think, it is the lack of mutual empathy that results in sword drawing in marriage. Did you catch what Gurney said? More than any other single thing. What is it that leads us to draw our swords and go to battle? Lack of empathy. Lack of being able to put ourselves in the other person's situation. Lack of being able to put ourselves in the other person's skin, in the other person's shoes. And isn't that precisely what Jesus is talking about here in this sermon? He's saying when it comes to expressing love, especially to people who are unlovely, trade places with them. Ask yourself, were you in their situation, what would you like them to do for you? Then Jesus says, do that for them. In Matthew, he adds, this is a summary of all the law and prophets. Empathy, trading places. A number of years ago, an article was published in a scholarly journal called Reader's Digest. I don't know the name of the author or the title of his work. The author was writing about this very theme, how to improve your marriage. What the author said, if you want to improve your marriage, ask yourself and answer just one question. If you want to improve your marriage, here's the question that the author proposed. Are you ready to hear it? If you want to improve your marriage, ask yourself and answer this question. What would it be like to be married to me? Did you feel the wave of horror that just swept through the congregation? I'll give you a moment just to settle down there. That's a frightening image, being married to yourself. I'm thinking, that's why I married you, so I don't have to be married to me. I wouldn't want to do that. Why did the author say, ask yourself a question? If you ask yourself that question and begin to enter into the experience of the answer, you will begin to understand your spouse and begin to understand why your spouse says and does the things he or she does. Do you know what the word for that is? It's empathy. Empathy. Now, I know it's hard to empathize with others, especially in marriage. I mean, we're so different in so many ways. We have different temperaments, different family backgrounds, different ways of viewing the world. We're different because we're male and female. In fact, on that last one, the differences between men and women, some significant ones, some common ones. Well, let me give you an example. It can be captured in one word, and that word is shopping. Shopping. You know what I'm going to ask you, and I'd like to hear your answer. Do you and your spouse feel the same way about shopping? Nope. Nope. Well, that's the answer. I suspect that resonates in many hearts, but you just didn't want to say it. Did you hear the story about the older man who was seated on a bench outside a store in the mall, sitting there and waiting and waiting, when he was approached by a young woman, a reporter, who was doing a story for her organization? She came up to him and said, "Sir, do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" He says, "I got nothing but time." "You're okay?" "Yep, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." "All right, I'll just ask a few questions of you. What are you doing?" "I'm waiting." "Who are you waiting on?" "My wife." "What's she doing?" "What's she doing? This is a mall. She's shopping." "Well, how long has she been shopping?" "Well," he said, "I'll tell you. When she went through the doors of that store over there, I was 35. "Really?" she said. "Well, I've got to talk to her." So she went in the store and tracked her down. "Is your husband out there?" Yeah. "Does he look like you?" "Yeah, that's him." "Okay, I've got to ask you some questions. What are you doing?" "Well, I'm shopping." "How long have you been shopping?" "Well," she says, "I'll tell you this. When I came in here to shop, I was 35, and now I'm 18. One activity puts one in the grave and resurrects the other. In fact, one of the writers for the network Star Ledger did a survey, surveyed a whole group of men, and this is what the writer said. "Of all these men that I surveyed, instead of going shopping, 89% of them, 89% of the men I surveyed," said the writer, "would prefer, instead of going shopping, to sit at home and watch their sports team lose." Lose! Rather than go shopping. So you say empathy is really difficult. It's really hard. Absolutely, it's hard because we're so different. We are different, as I said, in many ways: temperament and background and view of the world and gender, and the list goes on. And so to try to enter into the experience of another person can be very difficult indeed. And yet we come to the sermon of Jesus, and Jesus is unequivocal in his directive. He says, "Do to others what you would have them do to you." That's his ethic, an ethic based in love, an ethic fleshed out by empathy. So I suppose the question then is, well, exactly how do I do this? How do I experience and express empathy in my marriage? Well, in a great little book written by Les and Leslie Parrott, whom I mentioned earlier, is entitled simply Trading Places. Trading Places. In that book, they suggest 3 simple steps for trading places. Step number 1. If you want to trade places, if you want to experience and express empathy, they said, it is expressed by these words: I see you. I see you. In other words, I look at you. I look at your face, your body language. I look into your soul. I see what it is that you are experiencing. I see you. That's step number 1. A father had come home from work and was busy going through the mail, sorting it out, throwing things away, setting aside the bills, and his 5-year-old son kept trying to tell him something. "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," he said, "listen to me." And the father said, "I'm listening to you, I'm listening," and he kept on sorting the mail. "Daddy, Daddy, listen to me." And his father kept on sorting the mail. "Daddy." He said it 3 or 4 times, and every time his father said, "I'm listening, son, I'm listening." Then this boy, about 5 years old, said, "Daddy, listen to me with your eyes." His daddy set the mail aside and did exactly what the parrot said. I see you. I see you. Step number 1. If you're going to experience empathy, you have to know the other person's situation. So temporarily, not permanently, but temporarily, set aside your own agenda. Step number 2. Not only do I see you, but step number 2, I feel with you. I feel with you. Have you ever watched what happens with babies? Put a couple of babies in a playpen in a crib. Put a couple of them there. One of them is happily enjoying life, playing with his toes, his fingers, discovering his nose, sucking on his bottle. He's copacetic. Life is good. The other one is not so happy. In fact, something happens to the other one that makes that other baby upset. So baby number 2 finally begins to cry and then begins to wail and just lets it fly. Have you watched baby number 1? Just stand there and watch baby number 1 for a few seconds. Looks over at the other baby, and then what happens a few seconds later? Baby number 1, the happy copacetic child, begins to wail too. And now you've got 2 of them on your hand. Do you know that scientists are doing research these days on the brain and what they call mirror neurons? That we are actually wired to feel sympathetic with those we are close to, with those we love. With tiny filaments attached to the brain, they have watched which neurons have lit up in the brains of couples. One partner is going to get a shot, and something lights up in her brain. And do you know what? It lights up in the same area of his brain. Mirror neurons. We have the capacity to feel with each other. We are even wired that way, it seems. I see you. I feel with you. The third step, I act to help you. Now that I have seen the situation that you are in, now that we are mirroring one another's feelings, now I take action. The mirroring of one another's feelings is the empathy. Taking action is Jesus say, do to others as you would have them do to you. It's hard to do, but what a difference it makes. David Kingsrider was a tight end for the Minnesota Vikings back in the 70s. Kingsrider tells of the experience of being at his in-laws' house and getting trapped there by an ice storm. Probably not unlike some of the ones we've had. There they were at the in-laws. The ice storm came in. They couldn't go anywhere. This was in the day and age before a lot of the technology that we have today. And so he said, here we were, stuck at my in-laws' house, 3 solid days with nothing to do. So, said Kingsrider, since we didn't have anything to do, we watched family movies. He says we watched every family movie they had ever made over that 3-day period. Says Kingsrider, I watched my wife grow from a tiny little baby to a toddler, to an adolescent, to a teenager, and finally to the woman I love today. He said after 3 days of watching her grow up in that one compact experience, everything I felt for her deepened and changed. In fact, he said, I can tell you with truth, I have treated her with much greater respect ever since, because he saw her, felt with her, got into her skin, into her world, knew her experience, and it affected the way he responded. I act to help you. So we can ask, what is the best thing you can do for your spouse? And we can turn to the words of Jesus, words where Jesus is talking about how we are to relate to ourselves, to those who are unlovely and unlovable. And he urges us to a consistent and persistent type of love. But nestled at the heart of these words, he says, do to others as you would have them do to you. It's a command that can only be lived out based in the high principle of love, bathed in the ample amounts of empathy. But you know what I suspect? If we find some way to enter into our spouse's life and experience and skin and shoes, I suspect that something profoundly good can happen in our marriages. I suspect, in fact, that people, not just the people out there, but the people who know us best, our children, our families, and our friends, will come to look at us and will come to say, you know what? There's a marriage. There's a marriage where clearly there is love. Lord, today we have briefly looked at what we call the Sermon on the Mount, where you commanded us to be love, to love the unlovely and the unlovable. The only way we can do that is to understand what it is to be loved by the great God of the universe, a God who will come down beside us and see us, a God who sees our wretched, sin-filled lives and loves us anyways, a God who feels our joy, our sorrow, our helplessness, and moves in love to help us, to reconcile us to him. Thank you, Lord, for your mercy toward us. Go with us today, and every day is our prayer. Amen.